Have you ever been at a dinner party or a picnic and someone, let's say it's an uncle or cousin of yours, says something really crass and offensive that implicitly or explicitly shows that they don't know the difference between Filipinos and Mexicans, or like even that they believe Filipinos and Mexicans come from the same country? And it's not racist in the sense of actively advancing a racist hypothesis. It's just ignorant and offensive in a way that leaves you stunned and disoriented and not knowing what to say back to them. But it's just your uncle, or it's just your cousin, and it's just a dinner party, or it's just a garden party, a barbecue, and you're standing, and what are you supposed to do? What if it's not your uncle? What if it's the newsreader for CBS News? What if it's someone being interviewed as a politician on ABC News? And then what if it's someone who's in between these two extremes? It's not a dedicated public figure. It's also not a private communication. What if it's a YouTuber who's embarrassingly ignorant in this way about precisely the topics that he or she chooses to deliver monologues about on YouTube, right? What everyone would say about your racist uncle or your not racist uncle would be, well, he means well. He has good intentions. He didn't mean to insult the people of Mexico or the people of the Philippines. Yeah. Who's responsible for his ignorance, if not him? Now, I'm not saying we should throw the guy in prison, but like the point is, are we going to hold this guy accountable just to the extent of saying, look, there are some basic facts about geography and politics you ought to be apprised of before you go mouthing off about Mexicans and Filipinos, okay? Just put him in check in that way and really let him know this is serious. And if it's not serious to you, guess what? It's serious to tens of millions of people or hundreds of millions of people, depending on how you do the math. The outrageous stupidity and ignorance of my fellow YouTuber, Swayze, Unnatural Vegan. I know a lot of people are going to come and say, well, she has good intentions. And I've had emails sent to me by her fans and viewers many, many times about that. And, there is a sense in both scenarios in which I can recognize those good intentions. But nevertheless, I can also hold this person responsible for their ignorance. I can say, look, it's nobody's fault but yours that you chose to come on the mic without even looking up the dictionary definition of these terms, without even reading a Wikipedia article. And in Swayze's case, if you don't know, her YouTube channel, Unnatural Vegan, has a long history of reproaching, insulting, and denouncing other YouTubers for failing to look things up in the dictionary. And very often the failure is something she's used in a kind of intellectually dishonest way, where really what she means is you're not using the word the way I want you to use it, and really the other YouTuber was using it in a way that meets the dictionary definition. But leaving those details aside, I have heard her many times reproach people. Do you remember this when she said, oh, well, maybe you looked that up in a normal dictionary, but you didn't look it up in, say, an encyclopedia of philosophy where you would have found a better definition? Like this. Okay, so these are the standards she holds others to, and they are not standards she even tries to live up to herself. So a lot of you will have noticed, I checked the comment section, a lot of you noticed that she grossly misunderstood the meaning of the term neoliberal and neoliberalism right at the start of the video. And a quick Google search, you can do a lot of reading to really get to the bottom of the meaning of neoliberalism, how it's taken on, the meaning it now has in politics and in our culture. But fundamentally, she was completely wrong about the meaning of that term. I was just going back and looking at the first videos I ever did criticizing MGTOW, So this is MGTOW, pronounced MGTOW, of course. In case you haven't guessed, I'm against it. But MGTOW is an internet phenomenon. And in the earliest videos, I really took some time to say on camera, look, I want you to know I actually did a bunch of research for, make this. I didn't just look up the meaning of the term. I went and I contrasted different people's definitions and how it's used in this Reddit group and, why it's become popular in this way. I also have to do research. I also have to make sure I'm using words in a way that's meaningful to my audience. And, we're not just in the backyard having a barbecue. We're not just having a dinner party. There is a sense in which all of us have a higher level of responsibility. And if anyone would know that, it would be Swayze. It would be Unnatural Vegan, because she's lectured us all about that innumerable times. I mean, even think about, she says she won't have her own children on camera. And she thinks I shouldn't have my children on camera. I have a daughter. Like somehow it's immoral for me to show footage of myself on vacation. Really? You can listen to her explanation, which I do not find convincing at all. She wants me to be setting an example in a very peculiar sense, in which I don't want to be setting an example, actually. There's this old canard where people say, oh, well, it's like claiming playing a violent video game normalizes violence. That playing violent video games will make you more violent. We have a lot of video games about World War II. Have you ever seen a single one giving a sympathetic portrayal of Adolf Hitler, of the Nazi side? Actually, we all know what video games normalize. We all know the impact it has on our culture, right? Actually, all video games are censored to an unbelievable extent, even the most violent ones, because we know this, right? We don't think video games are merely acting out harmless fantasies. If we did, all those wars depicted in video games, but most obviously and most odiously, World War II would, if not have equal numbers of games depicting both sides, they'd have innumerable, really perverse reinterpretations of those wars and that history, right? No. We're all terrified of the idea that rednecks in their basements playing these video games will take on certain ideas, shall we say, about the history of World War II. It's actually very tightly controlled, the narrative, right? And what we're allowed to say here on YouTube is much more tightly controlled than you, dear viewer, could possibly imagine. I spent the last 5 days writing email back and forth to the censorship committee here at YouTube because I uploaded a video in which I was reflecting on what anti-Semitism means to me as someone born Jewish in the year 2021. And my video and my whole channel was blacklisted for hate speech, for racism, for anti-Semitism. Okay? I had to write a whole series of letters back and forth. And of course, eventually they caved. And then I had to write the further letters back saying, hey, I didn't get an apology. The little red circle next to the video turned green. You guys didn't take the time to say sorry. You didn't take the time to say sorry that you categorized my video in which I'm criticizing other people for being anti-Semitic, talking about the impact of anti-Semitism in my life, and you categorized that as if I were guilty of hate speech and racism. They also said that the video depicted violence, which it didn't, violence and gore. You did that to me in error. And okay, we are so tightly censored here on YouTube that I uploaded a video complaining that people in France don't wash their hands enough. And that was taken down. It was censored about 3 times. And with the final round of censorship, it was actually removed from public view. All right? Because that was racist against the French. The standards we're going to live up to as broadcasters, as journalists, as leaders of public opinion, as slacktivists, as activists, as radio talk show personalities in the post-radio universe of the 21st century. they're ultimately the standards we choose for ourselves. Okay? You know who I responded to the latest round of censorship that YouTube has put on me? I'm more committed than ever to making videos pointing the finger at neo-Nazis. I feel like I've got to double down and I've got to quadruple down. And I've got to be the one channel that's willing to get blacklisted and willing to get banned by making one video after another that has neo-Nazi in the fucking title. Okay? It really matters. In the year 2021, this is January of 2021. Do you want to pretend that neo-Nazism is a minor or marginal issue in American politics in January of 2021? Do you think that's something that's just fine for YouTube to just snuff out of public discourse and debate? It takes guts, all right? And I can tell you from direct experience, not all of them are this trivial, but I have experience again and again with making these kinds of videos, sometimes where I'm intentionally pushing the limits of what's acceptable on YouTube for a good reason, because I'm dealing with, a political issue that really matters to me, and sometimes where I'm just talking about how it feels to be Jewish and deal with anti-Semitism, where I don't think I'm pushing the limits at all, and I get punished anyway. Sometimes it's unexpected, sometimes it's expected, right? But I'm willing to make that commitment. I'm willing to take those risks, all right? Standards that matter, ultimately, are the standards we are going to hold ourselves to, all right? And what Unnatural Vegan is showing you again and again is that the standards she holds others to are standards that she does not entertain for herself. She doesn't care about for herself. Now, right after this snafu with the meaning of the word neoliberalism, what she runs into is a very obvious logical fallacy. And she's the queen of complaining that everyone else is guilty of logical fallacies, but doesn't look in the mirror, isn't interested in evaluating herself the way. She presents us with the logical fallacy that you can't complain that something is bad and wrong and evil unless you have something better to replace it with. That is a fallacy. So I'm not in a position to say this tire factory is polluting the river unless I know a chemical formula, I know a method of making tires that can happen without polluting the river. Really? Does that make sense to you? Huh? She claims that it is only because veganism can scientifically replicate nutrients like B12 and provide you with a nutrition complete diet to replace meat eating. So it is only on that basis. It's only on the basis of one thing supplanting, replacing, substituting for another that morally or logically we can point out, we can challenge, we can complain about a great evil. And of course, her point is to say that she thinks the communists, or even more broadly, the anti-capitalists, don't have a leg to stand on because they can't present a system that's better than the one they're criticizing. How dare you, Swayze? How dare you? When you're talking about slaves in the history of Haiti, almost every single one of whom would have been illiterate. I mean, incredibly few would have been able to read. And if they could read, probably the only book they'd ever read would have been a Christian book of prayers, hymns, songs sung at church. Right? There were slaves in Haiti who said, you know what? This system is bad and evil and wrong. And they didn't have a better idea of what to replace it with. All right? They could see the problem. And they were willing to fight and die without knowing the solution. Okay? History is made not by people who know the answers to problems. It's made by people who have the level of commitment to confront those problems in the absence of any possible known solution. History is made by the people who are willing to fight, to kill, and sometimes to die. Okay? Progress is not achieved through this kind of formula that Swayze presents you with, of having an equation where like, oh, well, here's cheese and here's vegan fake cheese to replace it. Here's where meat eaters get B12. Here's the replacement B12. Oh, well, here's how capitalism works. Here's how a better system than capitalism can fill out the equation. No. Progress is not made through the substitution of one thing that's known for another thing that is equally well established, proven, and already known. Progress is made through pressing into the unknown. We start to make progress when we're thinking about the unthinkable, when we're challenging ourselves to do things that seem impossible. All right. The leader of the slave rebellion in Haiti, the successful slave rebellion, he didn't just beat the slave owners, he beat the French, he beat Napoleon's best army. He wasn't oppressed. Toussaint Louverture lived in wealth and splendor. He had a very comfortable life. He had been a slave about 20 years earlier. He had a very privileged position as a slave, actually. He had about the best job he could get as a slave. He got along well with his master. The particular man who was his master was apparently a very humane and interesting fellow who had a relationship with him and liberated him after a certain number of years of service. He owned land. He had employees. He had farms. He was an entrepreneur. He was a businessman. If anything, he had everything to gain by preserving the status quo, by keeping the establishment, slave-owning French colonial establishment intact in Haiti. He was one of the winners of the system. And he gambled it all. He bet it all for a type of freedom that he and his people didn't know would work. It was something unthinkable. It was something none of them could even fully imagine.